Hello, and welcome back to Bombchu. I'm Tyler, and it's October, which means the spooky season is upon us. But before we get too far into the spooky month, let's take a look at what was added to Game Pass in September. September was a big month for Game Pass, not only due to the games added, but Microsoft brought streaming to the PC app. This means that you can now stream your Xbox Series consoles to your PC, but also you can play games from the cloud. Now we have a lot to cover, so let's jump into all 26 games. This month was all over the place genre-wise. Microsoft added a little bit of everything, it seemed. We got some visual novels, JRPGs, roguelikes, action games, shooters, and even another skateboarding game. No matter what you are a fan of, Microsoft has you covered. Speaking of that skateboarding game, the highly anticipated indie skateboarding sensation, Skatebird, was added as a day one title to Game Pass. It's pretty basic, but all the standard tricks are there. You have grab tricks, flip tricks, manuals, and grinding. The game overall didn't control the best, nor did the bird aspect really add much to the genre. Yes, you can fly a bit, but it's more like a falling with style sort of situation. Skatebird wasn't for me, but if you're looking for something that's just ridiculous, it may be one to check out. If you're looking for a skateboarding game though, I would recommend Skate from last month or splurging on the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater remakes. Now, I will say this about the controls of Skatebird, it wasn't nearly as difficult as the controls in I Am Fish. I Am Fish has you controlling a fish inside a fish bowl with some swimming sections on occasion. Your goal is to escape into the ocean by solving puzzles and navigating safely through a town. I was not a big fan of this game. To me, it felt like the awkward controls were supposed to be part of the fun, but they just brought me frustration. Another game that has awkward controls is Surgeon Simulator 2. I haven't played the first game in the series, but was very interested in checking this one out. Unfortunately, I was met with an infinite loading bug, as were many other players at launch of this game. After returning back a few days later, I was able to finally play the game. This game is hilarious and a blast. I would definitely recommend playing with others if you can, but even solo, it was just a great laugh. You try so hard to be so careful with the different procedures, but something always goes wrong, and next thing you know, blood is everywhere. I plan on revisiting this one later on with some friends. Now, Surgeon Simulator wasn't the only game with issues this month. Marvel's Avengers was added to Game Pass about a year after its initial release. If you weren't aware, this game had an awful launch filled with bugs on bugs on bugs. I was happy to check it out with the hope that the bugs had been taken care of, but unfortunately I ran into another infinite loading bug. I did return to the game after restarting, but was left with a pretty bad taste in my mouth. The menu of the game is also very confusing. It doesn't tell you which mode is for multiplayer or single player, it just tells you what the game type is that you will be playing. I had fun with the little bit that I played, and I do plan on revisiting this one, but I was just sad to see that this game is still having issues after all this time. Now let's talk roguelikes. Team 17's published game Crown Trick was added to Game Pass. This is a turn-based dungeon crawler roguelike. All the things are here. You have your procedurally generated maze, your permanent progression, and your grid-based movement. It's a very to-the-T roguelike, and it's good. It's definitely worth taking a look at if that is something that you are interested in. If you are looking for a more action-heavy roguelike, Nuclear Throne was added. This game from 2015 has aged quite well. I did have a little hiccup during the game, but a simple reset fixed that issue right away. Nuclear Throne is a post-apocalyptic roguelike top-down shooter, and it's damn good. I don't know what it is about this game specifically, but it just feels right. If you haven't ever tried it out, please check this one out ASAP. If magic is more your thing, Dandy Ace was added. Dandy Ace is an isometric, fast-paced roguelike where you play as a magician navigating through a procedurally generated dungeon trying to escape. This game is really colorful and does a really good job of making use of abilities that you find, even if you don't want to use them. It has an upgrade mechanic that I found quite useful, and I hope other games of the genre take note of. Another game that uses cards, but in a more literal sense, Tainted Grail Conquest was added to Game Pass. It's a deck-building roguelike with RPG elements. I wasn't too impressed with it since other deck builders already exist out there like Monster Train and Slay the Spire, both of which are currently part of Game Pass, but I can see how this game does things a bit different. It has an open-ish world that you explore and can decide what encounters you get in. It also has a torch mechanic similar to Darkest Dungeon. I don't plan on revisiting this one since we already have Monster Train and Slay the Spire, but if you want more deck building, it's there. A couple open-world survival games were added to Game Pass this month. Breathage is an outer space survival game that definitely does not take itself too seriously. I was laughing constantly while playing this game. The dialogue as you explore outer space and find casualties is just hilarious. I was pretty surprised by this one. I had no idea what to expect, and I was blown away by the writing alone. Oh yeah, and the survival crafting elements of this game were great. I'm interested to see where this crazy story goes. If oceans are more your thing, Subnautica Below Zero was added. I played a bit of the first one and really enjoyed it. The sequel appears to be a direct continuation of the story with a bit more of a focus on character development. If you played Subnautica, you already know what you are getting yourself into with this one. It doesn't seem to stray too far from the original. I'm enjoying it and am planning on playing a bit more before I decide to add it to the ever-growing backlog. We got 2 very different shooters added to Game Pass this month. Battlefield 1 came to cloud, which is great if you are wanting to experience the campaign. However, I would recommend staying away from the multiplayer on cloud. I played it for a bit to test it out, and it was nearly impossible to do anything. Battlefield 1 was highly reviewed at launch, and critics did enjoy the campaign quite a bit. I would say that if you are looking for a FPS campaign, which is hard to come by these days, then I would definitely check it out. The highly anticipated puzzle, strategic, class-based, turn-based shooter Lemnis Gate was added as a day 1 title to Game Pass. Lemnis Gate had some issues initially trying to find a multiplayer game in matchmaking, but the concept of the game is so interesting. They have several different modes, but they are all essentially played the same. You have 5 rounds where you pick a character class to play for 25 seconds. All of these rounds are looped over each other. This makes for some really interesting gameplay. It's a very unique experience, and I really hope this one takes off. Definitely check this out if you're looking for something to make you think a bit differently. Speaking of puzzles, Superliminal was added. This is a mind-bending, first-person puzzle game that is very focused on perspective. It even has a warning at the beginning about dissociation and derealization due to the nature of the game. This is one of those puzzle games that teaches you its language slowly, and it does a very good job at it. If you like puzzle games, definitely give this one a look. 2 very different RPGs were added to Game Pass this month. Let's start with Final Fantasy XIII. I'm just going to start by saying I'm not a huge Final Fantasy fan. I have nothing against them, I just never really played them. This probably has to do with owning a Nintendo 64 and not a PlayStation. Anyway, I spoke with Austin, who is a fan of this game, after I spent some time with it, and he informed me that the game really opens up at Disc 3. I didn't make it to Disc 3 for this overview, but I still was having a good time with the beginning. If you are into Final Fantasy or JRPGs and want to revisit an older game or want to play for the first time, I would say that this is worth giving a try. Now, Astria Ascending, I don't feel the same about this one. This game is a 2D, heavily anime-inspired art style turn-based RPG. It has a similar combat system to Octopath Traveler in that you gain focus points, and if you target weaknesses of enemies, you gain more focus points, which can be used to increase the effectiveness of an action. The combat was fun. Although I could not switch characters for some reason, it was pretty frustrating. Maybe it's a bug? The gameplay itself was very okay. The quests, fine. The character dialogue, fine. The game was just average. I was not a fan of this one, but don't let me scare you away from checking it out. If you are looking for a more story-heavy game but don't want the RPG elements, 2 visual novels were added to Game Pass. Signs of the Sojourner, although not a visual novel exactly, is a very heavy narrative game that uses cards to navigate relationships and conversations. Over time, you gain new cards, which allow you to learn new ways of communicating with NPCs. This game had some really chill music, and although I wasn't super into the gameplay mechanics, I could see that this game was doing something different, and I always appreciate that. If that is something that you look for, check it out. AI The Somnium Files is a sci-fi murder mystery visual novel that was quite a refresher to see after just playing Famicom Detective Club for Video Game Club. I'm not big on visual novels or murder mysteries really. If you listen to Video Game Club, you'll have heard me talk about that with 999 and the mentioned Famicom Detective Club. This one though piqued my interest. I think it's the sci-fi setting that really did it. It features a dream sequence where you solve a set of puzzles and they were really fair. I haven't really played a game like this and people seem to really like this one, so I'll definitely be giving it a second look. Now before jumping into my highlights of the month, there are 4 more games to touch on. Craftopia was added to Game Preview and Game Pass. This is a very heavily Breath of the Wild inspired crafting game, and when I say crafting game, I mean crafting game. This game revolves around crafting, so if that isn't your cup of tea, you are going to hate this one. This game was not very good. The frame rate is all over the place on PC and console. The controls are clunky, the game just wasn't fun. This game does go places, according to the screenshots, and people seem to really like it. Maybe it's something that I'll change my mind on in the future once it's out of Game Preview, but for now, I wouldn't recommend this one. Origami 2 was added as a Day 1 title to Game Pass. This is a third-person stealth action game where you play as an assassin. Oh yeah, and it has 3-player co-op, which is really neat to see. The game loop takes you on a variety of missions where you gather certain resources which you can use to upgrade your character and equipment. It reminded me a bit of Monster Hunter and how the loop works there, but unfortunately this game is very generic. It didn't have anything except the co-op part that really stood out to me. If I want to play a stealth action game, I can play Assassin's Creed or Ghost of Tsushima or even Hitman. It just didn't bring much to the table, and for that reason, I don't plan on playing much more of it. Flynn, Son of Crimson is another Day 1 title added to Game Pass that I feel quite the opposite of. This is a 2D action platformer with beautiful pixel art and a very nice soundtrack. The gameplay and controls are solid. The game even features a wolf-like companion, and they are super critical to the story. It's a really fun, great time. Unsighted is another Day 1 title added to Game Pass from publisher Humble Games. This is another game with just beautiful pixel art. I absolutely love this game, and it was very close to making my list of top picks for the month. This game features great exploration, really fun combat mechanics, simple crafting and upgrading equipment system, and a very fascinating story. The game introduces you to the mechanics perfectly. Definitely check this one out. Now it's time for Tyler's top picks, brought to you by me, Tyler. If you only have time to check out a few games, I would highly recommend these. If you are looking for a super psychedelic, heavy story game with a great soundtrack, The Artful Escape has you covered. This game is gorgeous. I don't usually connect with story games this way, but I was so emotionally involved in the story with this one. It's a discovery story about finding out who you are and not following your family legacy. The writing is so believable, and the visuals are just stunning. As soon as I played this game, I bought it as a gift for someone who I know loves music and will really appreciate the story. I don't usually do that, but I just felt like this game is something special. Oh yeah, and it has Carl Weathers, so you know you got a stew going. This next game was a huge surprise for me. I went into this game thinking it was going to be a very basic narrative game, but it's so much more than that. Lost Words Beyond the Page is an atmospheric narrative adventure game where you spend your time between a diary of the main character and the story that the main character is writing in said diary. It doesn't sound too special, but give it a try. The way that the story is being told visually is very mesmerizing, and being able to play the story that you are helping to create is just so special. You feel almost more invested in the story because you have helped define a part of it. This game is beautiful and is worth picking up. Sable is another visually gorgeous game with a beautiful soundtrack to match. The art style of this game is so different than what you usually see. It's not just the way it looks too, it's the way the animations are. It's not something you usually see in a video game. Pair that with a great story and a soundtrack by Japanese Breakfast, you have yourself something that is just so good. Not to mention that you get to ride around exploring this beautiful world on a hover bike. This game is something special, and I highly recommend giving it a shot. I haven't played a game that oozed this much style since Persona 5. Scarlet Nexus from Bandai Namco is just amazing. This game has a melting pot of just style. The combat is awesome. You can throw cars at enemies using psychokinetic abilities. It takes place in a futuristic Japan and has a soundtrack to match it. The story is super over the top, but just fits the game so well. As soon as I stopped playing this game, I wanted to keep playing it. It's pretty much all I've been thinking about, and I can't believe I've sat on this game for so long. Having this on Game Pass is a huge win. I'm not a huge fan of Contra or Metal Slug or any run and gun shooters, but something about Mighty Goose just was really fun. In this game, you play as a bounty hunter who is a goose, who is accompanied by different companions throughout a journey hunting down evil. What isn't to like about this game? It features really fun enemies to fight, great weapons to use, fun vehicles, significant upgrades, and great boss battles. I didn't expect to spend my whole weekend playing this game, but here we are. Well, that's it. That was an overview of Game Pass for September. Every single game that came to Game Pass in one way or another. I was very happy to see such a variety for this month, and to see 9 games added day 1 is just great for the service. October has some games announced that I'm already looking forward to playing, so hopefully Microsoft can keep this train going. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and please let us know how you like this video by leaving a comment. See you next month!